Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between.
I think this might be the hottest take I've ever had on here. Buckle up. This is low-key brilliant, and this download gave me chills. So the download is that Trump is the archetype of the Demiurge. Not because he's evil incarnate, but because he's the necessary catalyst that exposes the entire matrix and wakes everyone up.
So two key things happened in the past year that has shaken America to its core and has finally opened the eyes of some people. Now, the first is this near civil war that has been going on in Minneapolis. For those who don't know the details of how this, for the most part, started, there was a podcaster by the name of Nick Shirley who decided to investigate Somalian fraud in daycares that were out in Minnesota. And he did these videos where he was essentially going to daycares demanding to see kids and the people not allowing him. And then he was saying, hey, see, listeners, there's actually no people there. They're just Somalians in these buildings pretending to have daycares, and they're stealing people's money. Some of the videos then some of the daycares kind of fought back, kind of showing that not only was there instances of him showing up after hours, so of course there's no kids there. Furthermore, some of the people were showing how this is a stranger. We have no idea who this is, and we are trying to protect children, and we're not just going to open the doors to let random strangers with cameras come in and look at these kids like we don't know this motherfucker. And anybody who has kids should be well aware that when you have a situation of picking up kids from school or picking them up from daycares or after school services, typically how the thing goes is you register the kid, and then there are people who are listed as able to visit or pick them up, and you have to show some form of ID. And that is designed so random strangers can't just fucking show up and kidnap your kids. But again, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the world who they just kind of take things as face value, and they don't critically think or look at the nuance of situations. And so the right kind of ran with this scenario that there was this Somalian fraud going on in Minneapolis. And quite frankly, Trump took this opportunity to go after one of his political opponents, and the governor, Tim Walz, who was running as vice president with Kamala Harris. And Tim Walz, for those of us who remember, Tim Walz was the one who he was talking that talk, and he was getting a lot of people on the left like riled up, like, hey man, he's actually saying some stuff that needs to be said. And unfortunately, the Kamala Harris team seems to have put a muzzle on him. But Trump, being the narcissist that he is, I know him and his team remember that hot shit that Tim Walz was talking as they were running up against him. And so Trump took this opportunity to go after him, and they sent ICE in mass droves into the streets of Minneapolis, which then caused a ton of civil unrest as the general public in Minneapolis stood up and started to protest. Now, a lot of people actually probably don't know or remember there was some fraud that was going on in daycare systems out there in Minneapolis, but that was actually looked into and investigated and taken care of by the Biden administration. And that was the $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud situation that happened. And at the head of that COVID-19 era fraud was actually a white woman by the name of Amy Bach. But unfortunately, as people have been primed to do in America, because quite frankly, whether you all want to admit it or not, everything in America comes down to race, because America was built on racism and things like that. A lot of people don't remember that. And the right saw this opportunity with things already being riled up about, illegal immigrants. And that's, been one of Trump's key things for the past decade is all these illegal immigrants. That's what's making America not great, is all these illegal immigrants. And they saw this podcaster do this series, and the right got riled up. It was like, hey, yeah, there's some illegal immigrants. Do what you got to do to get rid of them. And as I mentioned, ICE mobilized in the streets, and unfortunately, we saw the execution of Renee Good and Alex Purdy. Now, I won't go into all the details of those situations. Anyone who has not been living under a rock, you should know all those details. The one thing that I do want to call out is that essentially anyone with a pair of eyes can tell you that neither one of these people truly posed a threat, and they were executed by a force who is supposed to be there to enforce immigration control. So these were two law-abiding American citizens that got murdered. And I kind of talked about it on a TikTok video that I did, but this really kind of shows the cult that a lot of MAGA is living under, and it is this system that has been designed over the past decade of don't believe what you see, believe what I tell you. And so while Renee Good was in the middle of the street with her car, she was getting conflicting reports from different ICE agents of what she needed to do. And even though you can clearly see in her video that she's turning her wheel to try to drive away, and the officer who shot and killed her, feet were not in front of that driver's side tire. The Trump administration did a good job of sending signals to their base that this woman was being violent and attempting to violently run this guy over. And even so much is so even though unfortunately after there's video footage that after he shot and killed the woman, as her car drove off and hit another car, you could hear the man say fucking bitch, and you see him walk away. The Trump administration told their fan base that he had to go to the hospital for these extensive injuries, even though he just got bumped by the car as she was driving away. But again, the Trump administration has done a very good job with their cult of believe what we tell you and do not believe what you see. And so those people didn't believe what they saw, and they listened to what Trump said happened, and that's what they agreed happened. Then we saw the same thing with Alex Purdy, who was out at a location where there was some protests going on. He had his camera out to film everything because, you unfortunately cannot trust that the law enforcement or ICE agents have body cams, or that the body cams are actually running, or even if the body cams are running, if we ever get to see the footage. So a lot of American citizens arm themselves with their cell phones out so then they can record and document situations for their own protection. And a woman got pushed and knocked down, and Alex Purdy's last act as a alive human being, an American citizen, was trying to protect the woman, and he got jumped by quite a few ICE agents. And then from what it looks like in the video, one of the ICE agents saw that he had a gun. They pulled the gun out of his holster, and then it does appear as that person was walking away, either that gun that he took off of Alex Peretti let off a shot, or his gun let off a shot. Somehow one round got let off after the ICE agent had took the gun away from Alex Peretti, and then the cops proceeded to empty their clip. Or one of the ICE agents, end up emptying his clip into Alex Purdy and executing the man. And once again, all of those of us who were watching with our own eyes saw this man who posed no threat, who was jumped and put down on the ground by several ICE agents who seemed like they had him physically under control. He had been had his weapon disarmed, and still they shot and executed him. And the Trump administration went on their smear campaign saying that he ran up on them aiming a gun, and they were like literally showing the pictures of him holding a camera up and saying that it looked like a gun. And there was a guy on Newsmats who literally did a whole segment where he was like pulling out his cell phone to show like, oh, if you look at it from this angle, and like when you pull out the cell phone, it looks like a gun. Look at this, it looks like a gun. And they went on this massive propaganda campaign, and once again the Trump supporters drank the Kool-Aid and was like, oh yeah, you know, I don't believe what my eyes are telling me. I'm listening to what authority is telling me, and this is what happened. Now, a lot of that can be said is, in my personal opinion, tied to Christianity. And Christianity very much so trains people to respect authority, respect law and order. You don't stand up to authority. You stay in line. You stay in check with authority. And quite frankly, Christianity teaches people not to believe what they see with their eyes, believe what they're told, believe in, blind faith. Things happen in mysterious ways, and you can't trust this material world. You could only trust God and what we tell you. And the pastor, whoever is running the church, they're the ultimate authority. And quite frankly, a lot of people also look at these government agencies as those authority figures. And like I said, Trump has deified himself with MAGA, and he has aligned himself with some type of like Christian leader in America. And so it is no surprise that these people who have had this Christianity ideology ingrained in them since a very young age have now used that logic of only believing what you're told and not what you see, and it has moved over into real life politics and real life situations with humans getting executed. Now, after Renee Good and Alex Purdy got murdered, we did start to see more and more people wake up. We saw some people who were outraged by the Renee situation, and then we saw even more people outraged by the Alex situation, which I think, quite frankly, kind of goes hand in hand with what we see in America with, things happen with women, people kind of turn the other eye, or, kind of, it unfortunately at times is what it is. But when this white man who was a nurse got executed, there was more outrage than I had seen before. And that's around the time when you started seeing the Andrew Schultz and some of those some of those moderate social media influencers actually finally start to come out and say stuff against ICE. And a rift kind of then started popping up on social media where they were kind of calling out black people about there was a lot of white leftists and white Democrats who were like, hey, black people aren't mad enough. Like, you guys haven't been marching with us at the No Kings protest. You guys aren't as outraged as this Renee and Alex situation as we think you should. Like, where the hell are all the black people? And the black community kind of chimed back in, and we were like, hey, yeah, this executing of American civilians in the streets have been happening since the beginning of time, and we have been trying to warn you all of that with the police brutality movements, the stop police brutality movements, and with the Black Lives Matter movements. We have been saying for a while, hey, we are getting executed in the streets, and the police are using excessive force, and the police are getting away with a bunch of stuff, and they are killing us for absolutely no reason. And while there has been some allies, people who are not, persons of color, there has been some allies. For the most part, a lot of these injustices have been met with excuses about, black on black crime, met with excuses of, oh, well, you understand how, stressful it is being a cop. You just got to understand sometimes, this shit happens. And quite frankly, there's been a lot of complacency with a lot of people who just did not care because it did not impact them. There's a video that I had saw shortly after the Alex Peretti thing, and this guy was distraught, and he was kind of stating how it's only a matter of time before ICE executes a child, and we start to see excuses for it. And the black community had to remind that content creator and other people out there in America, we have already seen children executed by figures of authority, as we saw what happened with Trayvon, who got murdered by a security guard, and you guys called him a thug and started cracking jokes about Trayvoning. And we saw Tamir Rice, who was a 12-year-old who was playing with a freaking toy gun, and even the person who called the cops on Tamir Rice was like, oh yeah, I think he's playing with a gun, but cops still showed up, and within 3.5 seconds of getting out of their vehicles, they shot and murdered Tamir Rice, and many people were silent. And we have seen this time and time again of black and brown people getting executed and getting deported, and people not caring. And then it wasn't until violence was on the at the doorstep of white America did some people in white America finally say, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And that is one of the things that we have been telling people since the beginning of time. What the government and what people of authority do to the disenfranchised, the people on the bottom, is what they plan to do to everyone once they get a chance to. And so maybe if we had stood up and fought police brutality in the 90s and all these fucking unarmed black people who have been executed by the cops for decades on end, maybe if we as Americans came together and fought this stuff, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation with ICE. But people were complacent and people stood back because the violence wasn't at their doorsteps and they didn't care. And now the violence has spilled into their streets and now they're scared. This brings us over to the second key thing that has happened in the past 12 months, and that is this Epstein files debacle. As I mentioned earlier, it went from that was what they were running on, which then kind of reopened the public interest into the Epstein files, and then they went through just all these, different excuses behind it. And then finally, after the Epstein Transparency Act got passed, we finally had a situation where they had a deadline to release some files. They didn't get released in the time that they were supposed to, but 3 million files got released, and we saw a whole bunch of stuff about children getting raped and some other stuff. But then the second wave of files that came out, things got even darker, as essentially with these additional files that came out, we learned that not only were there kids being raped on these islands, but there was all these crazy rituals going on, and there were situations where there were government officials from America and from around the world, and also people from high walks of life in the entertainment industry and a lot of other sectors. These people were not only raping children on this island, they were killing people and also possibly eating people.